All right. So what are we going to do about Elihu, Shari? What are we going to do?
I guess that remains to be seen, Jess.
All right, let's figure this out.
Yeah.
I'm going to go ahead and read this. So Elihu talks forever.
Are you going to read all?
Yeah, we're going to read. We're going to read it all.
Oh, okay.
So 32 through 37. Are you ready? Buckle up.
You got to speed read.
Okay. So just so people know where we are, Job just kind of gave his last speech where he presents his case. We went over Job's whole speech last time, and it ends with the words of Job are ended. So right after that, chapter 32. So these three men ceased to answer Job. That's his three friends, because he was righteous in his own eyes. Then Elihu, son of Barachel, the Buzite, the family of Ram, burned with anger. He burned with anger at Job because he justified himself rather than God, and he burned with anger at Job's friends because they had found no answer, although they had declared Job to be in the wrong. Now Elihu had waited to speak to Job because they were older than he, and when Elihu saw that there was no answer in the mouth of these three men, he burned with anger. And Elihu, the son of Barachel the Buzite, answered and said, I am young in years and you are aged. Therefore I was timid and afraid to declare my opinion to you. I said, let days speak and many years teach wisdom. But it is the spirit in man and the breath of the Almighty that makes him understand. It is not the old who are wise, nor the aged who understand what is right. Therefore I say, listen to me, let me also declare my opinion. Behold, I waited for your words. I listened for your wise sayings while you searched out for what you say. I gave you my attention, and behold, there was none among you who refuted Job or who answered his words. Beware lest you say, we have found wisdom. God may vanquish him, Beware lest you say, quote, we have found wisdom. God may vanquish him, not a man, end quote. He has not directed his words against me, and I will not answer him with your speeches. They are dismayed. They answer no more. They have not a word to say. And shall I wait because they do not speak, because they stand there and answer no more? I will answer with my share. I also will declare my opinion, for I am full of words, and the spirit within me constrains me. Behold, my belly is like wine that has no vent, like new wineskins ready to burst. I must speak that I may find relief. I must open my lips and answer. I will not show partiality to any man or use flattery towards any person, for I do not know how to flatter, else my maker would soon take me away. Chapter 33. But now hear my speech, O God, O Job, and listen to my words. Behold, I open my mouth, my tongue in my mouth speaks. My words declare the uprightness of my heart, and what my lips know, they speak sincerely. The Spirit of God has made me, and the breath of the Almighty gives me life. Answer me if you can. Set your words in order before me. Take your stand. Behold, I am toward God as you. I too was pinched off from a piece of clay. Behold, no fear of me need terrify you. My pressure will not be heavy upon you. Surely you have spoken in my ears, and I have heard the sound of your words. You say, quote, I am pure without transgression. I am clean. There is no iniquity in me. Behold, he finds occasion against me and counts me as his enemy. He puts my feet in the stocks and watches all my paths. End quote. Behold, in this you are not right. I will answer you, for God is greater than man. Why do you contend against him, saying he will answer none of man's words? For God speaks in one way and in two, although man does not perceive it. In a dream, in a vision of the night, when deep sleep falls on men, while they slumber on their beds, he opens the ears of men and terrifies them with warnings, that he may turn man aside from his deed and conceal pride from a man. He keeps back his soul from the pit, from his life from perishing by the sword. Man is also rebuked on the pain of his bed and with continual strife in his bones, so that his life loathes bread and his appetite the choicest food. His flesh is so wasted away that it cannot be seen, and his bones that were not seen stick out. His soul draws near the pit, and his life to those who bring death. If there be for him an angel, a mediator, one of the 1,000, to declare to man what is right for him, and he is merciful to him and says, quote, deliver him from going down into the pit. I have found a ransom. Let his flesh become fresh with youth, and let him return to the days of his youthful vigor, end quote. Then man prays to God, and he accepts him. He sees his face with a shout of joy, and he restores to man his righteousness. He sings before men and says, quote, I sinned and perverted what was right, and it was not repaid to me. He has redeemed my soul from going down into the pit, and my life shall not look upon the light. And my life shall look upon the light, end quote. Behold, God does this thing twice, 3 times with a man to bring back his soul from the pit so that he may be lighted with the light of life. Pay attention, O Job. Listen to me. Be silent, and I will speak. If you have any words, answer me. Speak, for I desire to justify you. If not, listen to me. Be silent, and I will teach you wisdom. Chapter 34. Then Elihu answered and said, hear my words, you wise men, and give ear to me, you who may know, for the ear tests words as the palate tastes food. Let us choose what is right. Let us know among ourselves what is good. For Job has said, I am in the right, and God has taken away my right. In spite of my right, I am counted a liar. My wound is incurable, though I am without transgression. What man is like Job, who drinks up scoffing like water, who travels in a company with evildoers and walks with wicked men? For he has said, it profits a man nothing that he should take delight in God. Therefore hear me, you men of understanding. Far be it from God that he should do wickedness, and from the Almighty that he should do wrong. For according to the work of a man he will repay him, and according to his ways he will make it befall him. Of a truth, God will not do wickedly, and the Almighty will not pervert justice. Who gave him charge over the earth, and who laid on him the whole world? If he should set his heart to it, and gather to himself his spirit and his breath, all flesh would perish together, and man would return to dust. If you have understanding, hear this. Listen to what I say. Shall one who hates justice govern? Will you condemn him who is righteous and mighty? Who says to a king, will you condemn him who is righteous and mighty? Who says to a king, worthless one, and to nobles, wicked man? Who shows no partiality to princes, nor regards the rich more than the poor, for they are all the work of his hands? In a moment they die. At midnight the people are shaken and pass away, and the mighty are taken away by no human hand. For his eyes are on the ways of a man, and he sees all his steps. There is no gloom or deep darkness where evildoers may hide themselves. For God has no need to consider a man further, that he should go before God in judgment. He shatters the mighty without investigation. He sets others in their place. Thus, knowing their works, he overturns them in the night, and they are crushed. He strikes them for their wickedness in a place for all to see, because they turned aside from following him and had no regard for any of his ways, so that they caused the cry of the poor to come to him, and he heard the cry of the afflicted. When he is quiet, who can condemn? When he hides his face, who can behold him? Whether it be a nation or a man, that a godless man should not reign, that he should not ensnare the people. For he has said to God, I have borne punishment. I will not offend anymore. Let me start that over. For has anyone said to God, quote, I have borne punishment. I will not offend anymore. Teach me what I do not see. If I have done iniquity, I will do it no more. Will he make repayment to suit you because you reject it? For you must choose and not I. Therefore, declare what you know. Men of understanding will say to me, and the wise man who hears me will say, quote, Job speaks without knowledge. His words are without insight, end quote. Would that Job were tried to the end, because he answers like wicked men. For he adds rebellion to his sin. He claps his hand among us and multiplies his words against God. I'm not going to keep reading. I think we should stop and start talking about some of this.
Good idea.
All right.
Good.
All right. So that was 32 through 34.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, I got to ask you, in that section there, what's a favorite verse out of that? Do you have one?
What's my favorite verse out of all that?
Favorite it can be in a, like, or the one that stands out to you. Let's say it that way. I'm just curious.
Do you have one in mind that stands out?
I do.
What is it?
It's 33:33.
Oh, if not, listen to me, be silent, and I will teach you wisdom.
That's the one.
Yeah.
When I read that, I was like, excuse me? Like when you remember Job talking about how when he came into the gates and he canceled people, and he was like how did he put it? Like a one who comforts the mourner.
Mm-hmm.
And
he's like a king among his troops.
His words were like the latter rain, that
yep.
They drank in, and I read this and I was like, wow, like you have some high hopes there, buddy.
Well, you get the sense that Elihu is kind of parroting things from the friends and from Job. Like
he does. Yeah.
Job's kind of spoken a little bit in that way, like, you guys don't have wisdom. Let me tell you something. And then he'll tell him something. And it's like Elihu's kind of like parroting that, but the tone is all off with Elihu.
Well, at least with the friends are like, all right, you windbag,
Yeah.
Let me tell you how it really is. And then Job's like, okay, I don't want to hear the wind coming out of your mouth anymore.
Right.
And so it's kind of like a collegial back and forth, but this guy comes in like he's just got the latest news that nobody knows. Nobody's heard this before.
Yeah. He thinks he's got something figured out.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a young guy. He's younger than them all. He's also not one of the friend group. So at least like Job and the others were friends, and they had like a rapport or something beforehand, at least.
Right.
Even though they end up, saying terrible things, like the friends say terrible things about Job. But here's this guy who's kind of on the outside listening in, and he's coming at it from a purely sort of intellectual standpoint. He doesn't have a relationship with Job. He doesn't have a relationship with the friends. He's coming to it as kind of like some sort of.
Well, he seems to be well aware of his youth, of their eldership. Like, like we talked about this before, how in more ancient cultures, elders are really important, right?
Yep.
And he does say that he was timid and shy to say anything.
He spends all of chapter 32 just saying, like, I'm going to say something. Listen to me. I've waited.
Yeah.
I'm going to say something. Here I go.
I couldn't help but think about the fact that also it says here that he spoke out of anger. And when I read that, I thought about Blake's painting or illustration with his left foot forward. And I thought, I wonder if that has something to do with it.
Yeah, it could be.
Right? Because because he's starting out on the wrong foot.
Right. Yep.
He's totally starting out on the wrong foot.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to look at something in 33. So 32 basically introduces him. Oh, there's a couple interesting things about him. like we learn about the family that he's from, and then the area that he's from. So it seems like he could be the descendant from a brother of Abraham.
Yeah, I read somewhere when I was digging around that now I forgot the guy's name. Abraham's concubine's son. What was his name?
Oh.
You know the guy.
um
Anyway, they thought it was from that side of the family.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but I don't know. I didn't read enough scholarship about it, so I don't know how reliable that source is.
And from what I know, like no one's really for sure. They're trying to match up names with like genealogies here or there.
Yeah.
And there was something I read that was interesting that I think this is like a new thing that some people think that Elihu actually wrote the book of Job because of the lengthy way he's introduced, that he wrote himself in, but I don't know. That doesn't.
Well, according to the rabbi, it's traditionally thought that Moses wrote it. So let's scratch that.
Yeah, for sure.
I'll go with Jewish tradition.
Yeah, I think it's much more likely Moses wrote this than Elihu. Especially and people who say that Elihu wrote this like Elihu, and they think Elihu's essentially right in what he says. Which I don't. So that already is like a problem. So anyway, Elihu is introduced. He's younger. He introduces himself for like a whole chapter, even a little bit more. And then finally he gets into, in 33, he says in verse 8, so he quotes Job. He does this throughout. He'll quote Job and then do an argument. So he says, "You say, I am pure without transgression. I am clean and there is no iniquity in me. Behold, he finds occasion against me. He counts me as his enemy. He puts my feet in the stocks and watches all my paths." So that's true. He's not saying, like I wrote down 13:27, Job 13:27 is where Job says to God, "You put my feet in stocks, you watch all my paths, for you set a limits for the soles of my feet." So
that's way back there, boy. He's got a good memory, eh?
Yeah, Elihu is like a smart guy. He's like an intelligent young guy.
You read the book and he knows.
Right. And then he says, Elihu says, "Behold, in this you are not right. I will answer you. God is greater than man." So I was listening to Father Freeman. I forget his first name. Stephen Freeman. And he was saying how Elihu basically makes an error, because Job is saying, okay, we have our doctrine of retribution. The good are rewarded, the evil are punished. Okay. So but Job is saying, especially in what we just read last time, which was chapter 29 through 31, he talks about his life before, like the good old days, but he doesn't talk about it in terms of like, he talks about when God was with him, and then he talks about his current suffering when God has withdrawn from him. Mm-hmm. And so Job sees this as, when God was with me, all these things were working well. Now God is withdrawn from me and now I suffer. And he's wondering why. This is Job's question. So why do the righteous suffer? Why would God withdraw from the righteous? And Elihu and the other friends don't understand this at all. They think he's saying that God is punishing me and I'm innocent. God is punishing me. And Elihu's, let me try to get this right.
Yeah. I'm listening.
They're thinking he's saying something about the doctrine of retribution, like saying like, oh, do you think God just punishes the righteous now and he doesn't the wicked? And Job's like, no. Like we're still, it's like still do good, avoid evil. But why, what's with the withdrawal? Why did God withdraw from me? And then Elihu is basically saying like, oh, in Job defending his own innocence, he's like, I'm innocent, I'm righteous. He's like, Elihu thinks that Job is saying he is more righteous than God and he is more just than God. And so he's like, how dare you say that? And then interprets this as like proof of his wickedness. Of
his self-righteousness, yeah.
Right. And so this is kind of what he means when he's like, God is greater than man. Why do you contend against him, saying he will answer none of man's words? So he's mad about this idea that Job is like, I want to speak to God about this. I want God to hear me, and I can't find my way to him. He's hidden himself from me. And so Elihu's like, he has spoken to you. So he says in verse 14, God speaks in one way and two, and man does not perceive it. So he gives two examples. First is in dreams and visions of the night, when he opens the ears of men and terrifies them with warnings. That's number one. And then number two is he's rebuked with pain in his bed. So there's two things. He's like, God is already speaks in these two ways, in terrible dreams and in suffering. And this is before basically the scriptures were written. So these are the ways God speaks. And he's basically stealing from Eliphaz. Basically, the first time Eliphaz talks, he talks about these two things. Because Eliphaz tells Job of his dream, his terrible dream, when that spirit comes over him just before he's going to sleep and whispers to him, is like, who is righteous before God? And then the other thing is Elihu's like, God has brought, Job asked the question, why am I still alive? And Elihu answers, he's like, blessed are you that God reproves you and keeps you alive. So disciplines you, keeps you alive, doesn't take you out, so you have a chance to repent. And so that it's basically what Elihu's first thing is that he says. He's like, God is speaking to you, Job. He's speaking to you through your terrors, this torment, and he's also speaking to you through your pain.
Yeah.
Those are the ways, like you say, God speak to me, so he's already speaking to you.
So he's really original. He's a super original thinker. I mean, honestly, he's talking about what he's already, what he's plainly heard from Eliphaz, and what he plainly sees in Job. Right. And then he's like, oh, I know that's God talking.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of funny because like how Job kind of summarized everything up in the previous 3 chapters, Elihu was kind of summarizing up all the arguments, and he kind of brings something new to it. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah. I have a question. Like, it seems to me that a lot of commentators who like Elihu, those kinds of commentators, seem to derive some kind of magical meaning from the fact that he just appeared and he doesn't take his exit, right? So it's like an assumption that he's like the Alpha and the Omega or something.
Yeah, he's like Melchizedek. He just appears.
Yeah, like they draw all these conclusions about him being a Christ archetype, and yeah. Anyway, I
Well,
have some thoughts about that,
yeah,
but
I
I don't
mean,
talk
within
about
the
it.
book of Job, like God rebukes Job's three friends. Nothing's ever said about Elihu after this. Job doesn't say anything. God doesn't say anything. The other three friends are clearly wrong because God says they are, but Elihu isn't. But if you just look at the rest of the Bible and the New Testament, where like Job is mentioned, Elihu is never mentioned again in the Bible.
Yeah, like when I was thinking about the fact that he doesn't take an exit, like an official exit, like Elihu left or whatever, because I think Zohar leaves, right? Zohar leaves.
Well, he just doesn't speak again. We assume
Oh, he
he's
doesn't
just
speak
gone.
again. Oh, okay. But there's a verse in 33:6, I think it is. He says, "Behold, I am according to your wish in God's stead." What does your version say?
In 33:6,
Yeah.
behold, I am toward God as you are.
Because I read it also, I am speaking on behalf of God.
Oh yeah,
Something
he's definitely
like that.
doing that.
Yeah. And then I thought, well, maybe that's why he's missing in action.
Well, we'll get to this. I'll tell you what I think happens at the end.
Yeah, I like that theory.
Yeah.
But let's talk about that for a minute.
Yeah.
Like, how many people do that? If they don't say those exact words, they say something like, "The Lord told me," right? God told me. I mean, like 3 days before I got married, 3 days before my wedding day, I got a letter from some guy that said God told him that he was supposed to marry me. And I was like, well, he didn't tell me.
Yeah.
And I have to say, like, I really didn't like that kind of phrasing. The Lord spoke to me and he said, I thought, man, you have to be so careful about what you claim God told you.
Yeah.
I mean, we think Alex Jones is nuts, right?
Yeah.
No, seriously, like, it's like saying the president told me, or I don't know. I can't even think of it's a huge deal to say that, like to say God told me that you have to do this.
He's claiming some kind of revelation that he's got.
Yeah. He's claiming knowledge and certainty, and Job's claiming the opposite.
He's saying, I don't know, and I'm confused.
Yes. He's talking about unknowing and uncertainty.
Yep.
I personally, like, just based on that alone, I tend to think that Job is far more authentic.
Well, this is also one of the reasons why people like Elihu. Is because he is certain. Yeah. He is, exactly. And Job is uncertain.
Yeah.
So I understand why people like Elihu, because I understand to a degree. There's something we'll get to in 35 that I'm just like, I don't know how you get past this. But
okay,
let me bring up a couple things here. He is he's shying away for a little bit from he's changing the doctrine of retribution, saying he's not punishing you for your wickedness. He's keeping you from falling into the pit. So it's
he's
his soul draws near the pit, and his life to those who bring death. Okay, so he keeps using this image of going toward the pit and then being pulled back from it. And even like he says in verse 29, behold, God does these things twice, 3 times with a man to bring back his soul from the pit, that he may be lighted with the light of life. This is almost like a near-death experience. He's like, God will scare the crap out of you to set you straight.
Yeah.
And if he has to do it 2 or 3 times, he'll do it. And this is what's happening, Job, is you're being scared straight. Because so he's like, God's already spoken to you through your pain and your terrors, through these dreams. And what he's telling you, Job, is that you're rebellious and that you have pride. And he's trying to pull you back from the pit. And your unrepentance, well, he's basically going to just say that your unrepentance is, you'd rather go into the pit than repent. You'd rather, and this is more proof of you're just rebellious.
Right.
And this is it's like non-falsifiable, because we know Job is innocent. And again, just like his friends were using in the doctrine of retribution, like, we know you're wicked because you're suffering. It's just plain. Well,
see, this is,
but he's saying, I know you're wicked because God is trying to save you from your wickedness through your suffering. It's like this redemptive suffering.
Yeah. This is the thing about the book of Job, is that we have the advantage as the reader of already knowing that Job hasn't done anything wrong, right? Mm-hmm. We also know that he's vindicated in the end, right? Yep. That's like re-emphasized. Mm-hmm. And but if we didn't know that, then these arguments would really
be logical.
Strong. They would be strong arguments, and they're arguments that are carried out today. Like people. So I guess what I'm trying to say is the beauty of the book of Job to me is that even though these arguments sound really good, we already know that they don't hold up, right?
Right.
We know that. So you have these two bookends, right, that vindicate Job, but in the middle you have all this rationality, basically. And
people trying to reason together.
And what's so shocking to me is that people still fall into the trap.
Right.
Yeah. They do.
Yep.
Even though it's bookended with no.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, but I think again, like, because there's nothing definitively said about Elihu afterwards, it's left up to the reader to kind of do what they will with Elihu. And I mean, that is kind of what it is. So Elihu picks up on the mediator, though, which is interesting. So let me read this part. He says, if there be for him an angel, a mediator, one of the 1,000, to declare to man what is right for him, and he is merciful to him and says, deliver him from going down into the pit, I have found a ransom. Let his flesh become fresh with youth, and let him return to the days of his youthful vigor. Then man prays to God, and he accepts him. He sees his face with a shout of joy, and he sings before men and says, I sinned and perverted what was right, and it was not repaid to me. Okay. So he picks up on Job's mediator thing. He, like his other friends, sort of ignored it or dismissed it or crushed it. But then he adds the idea of the ransom. Mm-hmm. So Job wants a mediator because he could speak face to face with him, that could mediate between him and God. Someone who could speak face to face with God, also speak face to face with him, and they could work this out. Job is trying to personally work this out with someone. Eliphaz sees the mediator as someone to bring a ransom, a payment.
Elihu, you mean?
Or sorry, did I say Eliphaz?
Yeah.
Elihu. Elihu introduces the idea of the ransom, which again adds this mechanical aspect to it. Is like the mediator comes down, pays the ransom, you come back, and like it's all there where there's no, that personal aspect is gone.
Yeah. Well, this is what certainty does, though, Jess. Mm-hmm. It works it all out. Like it's It's perfect. It's the perfect plan, right? Like I've heard people say it's just such a, it's so smooth. It's just, it works like this, and it's very mechanical in the mind, right? And they get a lot of comfort from that, you know?
Yep.
They get a lot of comfort thinking that they have it figured out. But what gets me about this book, so, you know, and like some of the things I read about Elihu and his speech, and, you know, is that to me that this whole book is addressing that very thing. It's addressing that very certain mechanical worldview that thinks everything is figured out. It's like what I call God throwing wrenches, right?
Yep.
The book of Job is a wrench, and it throws a wrench into that. And I think the reason it throws a wrench into that is because we fall into the rut of mechanical thinking and rationality so easily, because it gives us a kind of comfort, right?
Yep.
And then we go around, you know, with our little Bible tucked under our arm like this, because we think we have it all figured out. Like it's a nice, neat package. See?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's true.
Well, it's just like, we do this, God responds like that. We do this other thing, God responds like this. It's just this.
And it's like that, your friend who said, I can't stand thinking about God as chaotic.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
I can't stand that thought. Nobody wants to think about God as chaotic. But then, like we spoke about before, and we didn't really talk much about it, but under this, you know, chaos theory teaches that under the chaos, the seeming chaos is actually a pattern.
There's a higher order that
we just don't see it.
Yep.
Yeah. We, you know, so it's not actually chaos.
Yeah. And that's what Job is grappling with. He's holding all the things he knows in tension.
Yeah.
He's not letting anything, he's not lying. He's like, I see this is true. I see this is true. I see this is true. And his friends are like, no, that's you're wrong here and here. And you need to like get back in line with the system of how things, you know, this pulley and this string and this, these things all work together.
Yeah, because
Job is all personal.
Like, I mean, all those outlying truths that he sees, they have a chaotic randomness to them, right?
Yep.
They don't cohere.
They're
opposites, even in some cases. And so, he's actually creating a whirlwind of chaos around his friends with those things, if you think about it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, even the, you know, God appears in the whirlwind, and they were saying like, hey, you windbag. Like wind, the word for wind and speech and spirit is all the same.
Yeah, exactly.
And so for them to speak, this sort of twirling, the spinning of speeches and all this stuff, that is the whirlwind. And in, you know, if you remember back to the wisdom poem, it says God appoints weight to the wind. There's certain things that have more weight to them than others. And then this also gets to God talking about the lightning bolt. The lightning bolt is that moment when you're like, aha.
Right.
When something strikes you, like that's the metaphor for when something, and so Job holding all these things in tension in this whirlwind, there's certain weight given to different things. And in the end, that thing happens for him where he's like, I get it.
You know, I'm also thinking just now of how you've got this picture of Job, you know, coming up to the men at the gates when everything was great. And, you know, and they're just drinking in his wisdom. And he's not condemning, actually. He's comforting. That's how he describes himself, as comforting. So his words are not full of condemnation, okay? And in order to be that kind of person, you have to hold things in tension. Right?
Yeah.
You have to be the kind of person who's okay with ambiguity, really, in order to comfort the mourner, right? And so who can comfort Job, right? Who can comfort Job? It has to be somebody who can hold even more intention.
Right. Right.
And who is that?
That's God.
Right.
Yeah.
That's actually God. And, so you think about Job creating this little whirlwind around the friends, and they're like, get away from me with that chaos. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And then God shows up in an even bigger one, in an even bigger one. And Job's just like, right.
Right.
Somebody, because life is freaking complicated. And if you can't hold things in tension, your mode of being in the world will be destructive, just as his friends, were destructive to him, right? Yep. They were cruel and abusive.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's really good. So good. Okay. So he takes Job's idea of the mediator, turns it into a mechanical payment of a ransom. And this is like that one verse 27 where he sings before men and says, I sinned and perverted what was right, and it was not repaid to me.
Where's that?
27.
Okay.
He sings before men and says, I sinned and perverted what was right, and it was not repaid to me. And this is one of those ironic things that happens where the friends are wrong and they're not repaid for their wrong. They're instead forgiven by Job and by God. So
and that just goes to show, like, I was just talking about some of these things are opposites. God actually does the opposite. He doesn't just hold the opposites intentions, but he singularly accomplishes the thing, right, by the opposite action.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Okay. Into 34. So again, he quotes Job and he says, for Job has said, I am in the right, and God has taken away my right. In spite of my right, I am counted a liar. My wound is incurable, though I am without transgression. So that's true. I looked it up. I don't think I wrote down what verse.
What verse was that? Because my King James.
So this is 34, 5 and 6. What does yours say?
For Job has said, I am righteous, and God has taken away my judgment. Should I lie against my right? My wound is incurable without transgression. What man is like Job, who drinks up scorning like water, who goes in company with the workers of iniquity and walks with wicked men? Verse 9 says, and for he has said, it profits a man nothing that he should delight himself with God.
So this is
not what Job said.
Huh?
Job didn't say that.
Job did say it, but he was quoting what the wicked say.
Right. Yeah. It's totally.
So let me read what Job says. So this is 21:15.
Oh, that's good.
So this is the first time where Elihu basically misquotes Job. He says he actually quotes him, but this is what Job says. 21:15. So he's talking about
he's talking.
So he says, why do the wicked live, reach old age, and grow mighty in power? Okay.
Right.
Then he says in 15, or let's go to 14. They say to God, depart from us. We do not desire the knowledge of your ways. What is the Almighty that we should serve him? And what profit do we get if we pray to him? So he's saying what the wicked say, the wicked that are prospering, that have no need of God. That's what they say. So he's attributing to Job there something that he said about the wicked.
He's actually taking what Job said out of context.
Right. He's saying what you're saying is.
Yeah. It's the Kathy Newman interview with Elihu.
And then go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to say that is I love this chapter 21 because it's in that chapter when Job is going through all that. I'm just going to read it.
Mm-hmm.
Wherefore do the wicked live, become old, yea, are mighty in power. Their seed is established in their sight with them, and their offspring before their eyes. Their houses are safe from fear, neither is the rod of God upon them. Their bull gendereth and faileth not. Their cow calveth and casteth not her calf. They send forth their little ones like a flock, and their children dance. They take the timbrel and harp and rejoice at the sound of the organ. They spend their days in wealth, and in a moment go down to the grave. Therefore they say unto God, depart from us, for we desire not the knowledge of your ways. You know, this is where Job realizes that the wicked are actually happy.
Right.
You know, like
Right.
They're not just living. They're not just getting by. They're actually thriving.
Yep.
Right.
And Job has been a rich man. He knows,
I think,
he knows how it would be tempting to say, God, I don't need you anymore. I have enough material possession to take care of myself.
Right. Like he's saying, you know, it's kind of the reason that they don't acknowledge God is because they have everything and they're happy.
And everything's going well.
And they're good. You know, because these guys are trying to say, oh no, they're suffering, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, if I remember correctly, isn't there like intonations of, yeah, but they look happy, but they're not really, you know, it's that kind of thing.
Yeah. No, he's saying they're really happy. And this gets back to Job's personal thing. He's like saying they don't want anything to do with God. He's not saying like that they're not obeying the rules. They're not.
No. He's figuring it out. He's just it's like he's working it out in his head. He's like, oh, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So Elihu takes him out of context.
So then he says, okay, therefore hear me, you men of understanding. Far be it from God that he should do wickedness. This is 34:10. Far be it from God that he should do wickedness, and from the Almighty that he should do wrong. For according to the work of a man, he will repay him, and according to his ways, he will make it befall him. This is just the doctrine of retribution.
That sounds like the Protestant work ethic, doesn't it?
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
It is, yeah.
Of a truth, God will not do wickedly, and the Almighty will not pervert justice. And then he just sort of goes on, who gave him charge over the earth, who laid on him the whole world, if he should set his heart to it and gather to himself the spirit of his breath, all flesh would perish together, and man would return to dust. So he's just saying, like, if God, he's saying God can do no wrong. So why, Job, are you saying that God has made a mistake, that God has punished you unjustly? Why are you saying that? And that's not even really what Job is saying. Job is saying that this is how I'm being treated. This is how it looks. This is how it appears.
Yeah,
and
like he's
confused by it.
Yeah, he's insinuating now. This is the argument. Are you saying that God is evil?
Mm-hmm.
That's
exactly what he's
the
doing.
argument. And see, and this is where you have to be comfortable with ambiguity, right? Because the righteous suffer. So what does that mean? What is that?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that means that terrible things are going to befall people, right? Who are under God's care. I mean, come on. I mean, the whole story of the children of Israel is that. It's that.
Yep.
Right? I mean, they get led out of Egypt, you know, they're all triumphant. They can't wait for this life that they've always longed for. And what do?
Yep.
They suffer. They roam around aimlessly in the wilderness forever, you know, and people dying of disease, and, you know, it's like.
Well, and then later on, after, you know, Israel's established, they built the temple, all this stuff, and then they get led into exile.
Exactly.
Jerusalem sacked, the temple's torn down, then they go into exile. And they're trying to what is going on?
Yeah. And so this question that Elihu poses, it's often the what do you call that? Like the conversation killer, right? It's like, oh, so you're saying that God is evil, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
And that's why I say you have to be comfortable with ambiguity, because now I'm going to pull a Jordan Peterson and say, well, what do you mean by evil?
Right.
Is it evil to suffer? Is it? Because if it is, and God had the children of Israel, carried into captivity and made them wander around in the wilderness forever and didn't even let Moses go in,
mm-hmm.
then you would have to say he's evil, if that's what evil is to you. If suffering is evil, then God is evil. So now you have to redefine. Now you have to redefine evil, in my opinion. Like this is what God is. We talk about this a lot. Like who was it? Oh, Steiner. I think Rudolf Steiner said he wishes that. Oh, I'm going to get this wrong. Something about he wishes that there would be a new. Oh, now I can't even quote it because I can't remember it properly. Something about just new language for the same old thing all over and over.
Yeah, he wishes he could have a new word every time he talks about it, so that.
Right. Yeah, and I see this a lot in the scriptures where God redefines the old word, right? Mm-hmm. Or the old maxim, where he wants, this is why I think that the book of Job is about what it means to be righteous and not what it means to suffer.
Mm-hmm.
We kind of know that. We kind of already know the answer because we all suffer.
Mm-hmm.
But if the righteous suffer, right, and mm-hmm. everyone suffers, then what is righteousness? Because in my opinion, somehow that means everyone's righteous. But right. What is righteousness? Now, I'm not saying everybody's acceptable in the sight of God, but that's what we think righteousness is. But God's redefining it, in my opinion.
Yeah, He's redefining what that is. Lack of suffering.
Well, no, and maybe it's not even acceptable in the sight of God.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because God sees everything. He doesn't just see what's acceptable to him, right?
Mm-hmm.
The rain falls on the wicked or the just and the unjust, right?
Mm-hmm.
And God hears the cry of the widow and the orphan, and
not according to Elihu. That's what he says in chapter 35.
Oh my goodness. I didn't get that far in my thing this morning.
Well, we'll read that in a minute.
But what I'm trying to say is, I think that that's what we need in regular doses, is a realignment or a redefinition of these words, because we find something that's easy, comfortable to understand, and we just lay it on top of that, and then that's what we hear instead of the actual word
mm-hmm.
anymore, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, like when I say the righteous will suffer, and we all suffer, therefore everyone is righteous, people are going to go, because why? What are they thinking about?
Mm-hmm.
They're thinking about what it means to be righteous, but they have a definition that they haven't really given a whole lot of thought. And I think Job is the example of righteousness. So what are we looking at when we see Job?
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's the question that I asked myself. Mm-hmm. That's how I thought through this, right? Because I was like, if Job is righteous and the righteous suffer, then what the heck is righteousness? And how is Job embodying it?
Right.
right?
Let me read this. This is from Gregory the Dialogist.
Okay.
From AD 604. All right. He writes, Blessed Job, known to God and himself alone in his state of tranquility, when he was to be brought before our notice, was smitten with a rod in order that he might scatter more widely the odor of his strength. More sweetly he gave forth his scent as spices from the burning.
Yeah. Wow.
He had learned in his prosperity to rule over his subjects with gentleness and to guard himself strictly from evil. He had learned how to use the things he had got, but he could not tell whether he would remain patient under their loss. He had learned to offer daily sacrifices to God for the safety of his children, but it was doubtful whether he would also offer him, meaning God, the sacrifice of thanksgiving when he was bereft of them. Anyway, it goes on, but that whole idea of God, I lost it. Striking him with the rod in order that to spread more widely the odor of his strength.
Right.
The more sweetly he gave forth his scent as spices from the burning. I don't know.
Well, that's an interesting metaphor there, because when you smell spices burning, you're like, oh, what is that? I can smell cinnamon. I can smell cloves. Right? It's what's the word I'm looking for here? It's a complex smell. It's complex. That's what he's talking about when he says that. It isn't just straightforward, right?
Yep, that's good. All right, let's read 35 at least. Sure. I'll read 35 let's just read 35 because I want to talk about it.
Okay.
For me, 35 is the most brutal part of Elihu's speech. Basically, 34, I just get the sense that he is reiterating the doctrine of retribution. And then at the very end.
Yeah, there's one thing about 34 that I'd like to just mention.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so he's young, first of all. He's angry, okay? And those two go together normally in life. Young and angry, okay? I think it's a God-given thing, actually.
Yeah.
You need the youth to get angry and to push
to
on
assert himself
on the old, right? You need that. But he's also super macho. Like, God is just breaking things. He's just going around smashing things and breaking things, and he's a man's man. God is a man's man in his view.
Yeah.
Right.
It's like God's in his image.
Yeah. Yeah. I just wanted to say that.
So at the end of 34, he says, Job speaks without knowledge. His words are without insight. Would that Job were tried to the end, because he answers like a wicked man. For he adds rebellion to his sin. He claps his hand among us and multiplies his words against God. So he's accusing Job of this rebellion, this wickedness of not being repentant in the face of his suffering. Okay, so 35. And Elihu answered and said, do you think this to be just? Do you say, it is my right before God, that you ask, what advantage have I? How am I better off than if I had sinned? I will answer you, and your friends with you. Look at the heavens and see, and behold the clouds which are higher than you. If you have sinned, what do you accomplish against him? And if your transgressions are multiplied, what do you do to him? If you are righteous, what do you give to him? Or what does he receive from your hand? Your wickedness concerns a man like yourself, and your righteousness a son of man. Because of the multitude of oppressions, people cry out. They call for help because of the arm of the mighty. But none says, where is God my maker, who gives songs in the night? who teaches us more than the beasts of the earth and makes us wiser than the birds of the heavens. There they cry out, but he does not answer because of the pride of evil men. Surely God does not hear an empty cry, nor does the Almighty regard it. How much less when you say that you do not see him, that the case is before him and you are waiting for him. And now, because his anger does not punish and he does not take much note of transgression, Job opens his mouth in empty talk and he multiplies his words without knowledge. So that was 35. And the part I want to get to is verse 9, but I kind of want to talk about verse 4 through 9, or verse 4 through 8. He basically is just saying that if you sin, what does it do to God? If you're righteous, how does it benefit him? He's like being righteous or being wicked, it affects men.
Right.
So he's like, it doesn't affect God, which this is one of those like kind of half truths where you're like, you know, you want to say that, you know, God's unchangeable, but you also like, this is getting to the point where God's kind of just disinterested. He's so high up. He pointed to the clouds at the beginning. He's like, look at the clouds. God's so far up. What's that? Is it the clockmaker or the watchmaker or whatever? Yep. You just set the machine in motion, and now we have to obey the rules and just do the right thing down here. And so
everything you do is consequential to you.
Right.
Yeah.
Which shows, and I think some of the other friends had said something similar. Like,
well, it makes sense because it's the mechanical worldview, right? Like it's the mechanistic worldview. So,
So then 9 through 13 is pretty brutal. So let me read through this and talk through it. It took me a minute to figure out what was happening. So he says, because of the multitude of oppressions, people cry out. They call for help because of the arm of the mighty. Now, Job talked about this, right? In chapter 24, he's talking about the oppressed and the poor, and that was where he was empathizing with them.
Right.
So this is what Elihu says. So they're crying out. They call for help because of the arm of the mighty. But none says, where is God my maker who gives songs in the night, who teaches us more than the beasts of the earth and makes us wiser than the birds of the heavens? So he's saying, here these people cry out, they're suffering, but no one's saying thank you to God for the songs in the night, making them wiser than the animals. Okay, this is another one of those half truths. You're like, okay. And then he says, this is the brutal part, where he says in verse 12, there they cry out, but he does not answer them because of the pride of evil men. He's like, and because they don't thank him, he doesn't hear them.
Yeah, I know.
And you're just like,
I know. My screen will go black for a minute, but I just want to find something here. Hang on.
Yeah. So then he says, surely God does not hear an empty cry. So the cry of the oppressed, it's empty. And the Almighty doesn't regard it. And here is, like, for me, this is where Elihu is tragically wrong. Like,
well, I just wanted,
this is the core of his doctrine, and it's built on this very, very low view of man, and the mechanical way in which God interacts with man.
Yeah. Well, there's Psalm 72 here. It's a psalm for Solomon. So it's talking about Solomon as the king, right?
Mm-hmm.
But this is just a contrast to what a good king does, or, which is what God is, right? So it says here, Give the king thy judgments, O God, and thy righteousness unto the king's son. He shall judge thy people with righteousness, and thy poor with judgment. The mountains shall bring peace to the people, and the little hills by righteousness. He shall judge the poor of the people. He shall save the children of the needy. He shall break in pieces the oppressor. They shall fear thee as long as the sun and moon endure, throughout all generations. And then this description. He shall come down like rain upon the mown grass, as showers that water the earth. That doesn't sound very violent to me.
Yeah.
In his days shall the righteous flourish, and abundance of peace so long as the moon endureth. And then further down it says, he shall deliver the needy when they cry, the poor also, and him that has no helper. He shall spare the poor and the needy, and shall save the souls of the needy. He shall redeem their soul from deceit and violence, and precious shall be their blood in his sight.
It's really good.
And then there's another one, Psalm 121. Everyone is pretty familiar with this, I think. I lift up my eyes to the hills. From where does my help come? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. He will not allow your foot to slip. Your protector will not slumber. Behold, the protector of Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord is your keeper. The Lord is the shade on your right hand. The sun will not strike you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord will guard you from all evil. He will preserve your soul, and he will watch over your coming and going, both now and forevermore. Of course, that is written to, the children of Israel, right? But I think you can apply that to just everybody.
Yeah, that's really good.
To me, it just shows the compassion of God. In German, they have a word, Barmherzigkeit. It's more encompassing. Compassion can be like a pitying with, but a Barmherzigkeit is like holding everything within your being,
Hmm.
And
that's how Job was. They're like the words are almost the same.
Yeah, and that's how God is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and that's how Job sees God, and so that's part of his confusion, like what's happening.
Right, and that's why when Elihu describes God as this guy that doesn't even listen to people when they're in, like he's got it so wrong.
Yeah, and then this is, if I didn't really analyze it, but if Elihu's speech has a chiastic structure to it, this is the core of it, and it's bad. It's really bad. I don't see how anyone who defends Elihu can read that and then not throw doubt on basically what he's saying here.
Right.
Is something good. So, I sort of find that people who really like Elihu are really a core part of their own theology or belief in God. It has to do something with total depravity or original sin, which sort of not that you can't hold any of those doctrines without having a higher view of man, but they take it down to this very low view of man where there's nothing good. He's just a wretch. And this is one of those. Yeah.
Well, you can say that people who hold that doctrine don't have a low view of man, but if you put them in a position like these guys are in, they will become very abusive. I can guarantee you.
Right.
They will.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the points from like Job's friends came to comfort him and they end up abusing him.
Yeah.
Like why? It's because of that.
It is. And it's unfortunately, I hate to say this, but at the core of this ideology is the desire to see people suffer. Like, and I mean that in a very sadistic way, you know?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Well, and you look at who has a high view of man in the book of Job. Job does and God does.
Yeah.
Because God says from the beginning, he's like, did you consider who has a low view? It's the friends, it's Elihu, and it's Satan.
Eliphaz. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, something I was reading that I thought was kind of interesting was that not even Satan disagreed with God on Job's righteousness.
Yeah.
I never thought of that, but it's true. He didn't even disagree with him.
Well, he says it's a consequence of, like, Satan has a mechanical world too. He's like, it's a consequence of your protection.
Right.
It's
but
not
he didn't
authentic.
disagree.
Right.
He didn't disagree that he was righteous.
Right.
Right. Yeah. I thought that was kind of an interesting thing.
Okay, so let me read.
There was another thought. Just quickly, there's another thought.
Yep.
You know, like Elihu seems to think that God doesn't do anything wrong. And I was wondering, like, I was thinking about that. I mean, I believe that too. I don't think God does anything wrong, but I don't think about it in terms of good and bad, or like not in a moralizing way, right? And I think this is why it gets these people so heated in their arguments with Job, is because they think that God does nothing morally wrong, right? That Job, the way Job is presenting to them, completely destroyed and covered in sores, okay, implies that God is morally wrong, right? And Job says, Job insists on, to them, that's what they're hearing. Job insists on it, that God is morally, reprehensible, because he's doing this to me for no reason. And so this is why they have to think of a reason. And the only reason they have is that Job wasn't righteous. Right. And one of the commentators that I read said that Elihu is, his theory is that Job has a secret sin that nobody's stumbled over yet. Right. There's a secret sin somewhere and he's going to root it out. So, yeah.
When it's actually the opposite. Job has a secret righteousness that he's patiently enduring with. And
exactly.
this is that thing God says in the very beginning. He's like, he still hasn't, he still holds on to his integrity. And for Elihu, that's pride, and that's bad. For Job,
to be fair, it is a fine line.
No, it is. And here's the thing though, but that was the thing that God saw in Job, that he loved this.
Right. And that's why I say it's bookended with this foreknowledge and after knowledge we have, right? And so if it weren't for that, we would be just as stuck as his friends. I guarantee you. We would be. We'd be looking at their arguments for centuries, right? Trying to figure out where Job's sin was, just as they did, right?
Yeah.
But because we have these bookends, the bookends blow all that crap right out of the water. That's what they do.
Yep.
And I think that this is a place where we have to really consider. And I'm going to say this and people are going to misunderstand it, but we have to really consider, is God moral? Because I don't think God is. I don't think God is moral or immoral. I know Joseph disagrees with me here, but I don't think you can put that on God, because, well, first of all, we don't even really know what that is. Right? Morality. I think it's on a sliding scale over time. I mean, what was moral to the Aztecs is certainly not moral to us today. Right?
Right. Well, and it on what level? Like there may be things that, I mean, just even Jesus, like, is it moral to crucify your son? Like
Well, there you go. Well,
that's
we
the
talked
thing
about
is,
this too. I mean, what are the moral implications of creation?
right. Is it moral just to create a bunch of people and then have them suffer? Like, what are you doing, God? Like this is the whole question. It's like,
Yes.
God is up to something. What is he doing? And that's all of chapter 28 is trying to find out the hidden wisdom of God. Like, what is God doing?
Yeah.
And
then back to, I just want to point out again that
Mhm.
that is essentially Moses's question when he says, show me your glory,
Show me
right?
your
Like,
ways.
why this?
Yep.
Yeah.
And Elihu skirts it by just claiming that basically we can all be crushed like moths, like Eliphaz said.
Yeah.
And it's that it there is a fine line there, but it's also like you could have like a confidence in yourself that you are a child of God, and that's where your identity needs to be, is like, I am a son or a daughter of God.
Yep.
And it doesn't depend on whether you suffer or not, that identity. It's always like, that's clear. It's not like, oh, I'm suffering and what did I do wrong? You can actually hold on to the fact, like Job was always consistent about like, God, if I did something, tell me. If I had an indictment, I would wear it as a crown.
Right.
And so he demands the knowledge of his transgressions, because he'll always default to I'm righteous. And for a lot of people, they default to I'm a piece of crap.
Yeah.
Even when they don't have, they're like, what did you specifically do? They're like, I don't know. I'm just a piece of crap. That's like demonology 101. Like that's the trap.
It's also a nice way of not taking responsibility for the little things in your life that you really aren't doing right.
Mm-hmm.
You can always just go, well, my righteousness is as filthy rags anyways. So I might as well have another drink.
Right. I'm just a piece of crap anyway. I'll just do what a piece of crap does.
Yeah. And when God looks at me, he doesn't see me anyways. He just sees Christ. So
here, 1 second.
Like I always got the feeling that you were hiding behind the coattails of Jesus.
You said what?
When people would say that, Christ, when God looks at me, he doesn't see me, he sees Christ.
Oh, yeah.
I would think, oh, it sounds like you're hiding behind Jesus's coattails and just partying it up.
I know.
Going for
like I'll just step out from behind Christ and do a bunch of crappy things and then step back behind him.
I keep thinking about the prodigal son here, because the prodigal son doesn't understand sonship. He understands having, right? Having his inheritance and having fun and having food and, maybe having a position in his father's household, but he doesn't understand being. He doesn't understand what it means to be the son of the Father. And that's, I think, essentially what we suck at. We don't get what it means to be the children of God.
That's right. Yeah. And he doesn't even go back thinking, I will be a son. He's like, I'll go back and be a servant.
Right.
And because he remembers, he's like, my father treated the servants well. I could do that.
I could have that.
I could have
that. Right.
It'd be better than sitting in here with the pigs.
Yeah. And I'd have a roof over my head, and I'd have food on the table, and I'd have work to do, and maybe a little bit of money. Right. It's all have, right? Instead of, no, I am the son of my Father. Right. And because of that, he loves me. Yeah.
Yep, because the older brother falls into the same trap. He doesn't realize his sonship either.
No.
He's like, he gets angry at his dad and is like, why did you do that? You never even gave me a goat for a party with my friends, much less the fatted calf and all this stuff. And he rebelled. And the father was like, you never asked me.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's like, we have to celebrate because your brother was dead. And now he's alive.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I'm going to read 36 and 37.
And where you're going?
Huh?
You're going to go for it.
Go for it. All right. Basically, 36 is kind of this idea of redemptive suffering. And then 37, well, the end of 36 through 37 is just what I just deem the crescendo. It just is a crescendo up to God's speech. And it's pretty amazing. I really like it. It reminds me of Elihu reminds me of like King Saul. King Saul used to be filled with the Spirit and he'd go prophesy with the prophets, and like King Saul had these amazing moments, and yet he was always afraid of the people, and he was always making terrible decisions and just trying to stay in control. And like it was so anyway, chapter 36. And Elihu continued and said, bear with me a little and I will show you, for I have yet something to say on God's behalf. Like he just comes out straight and just says
it. Again.
I will get my knowledge from afar and ascribe righteousness to my maker. For truly my words are not false. One who is perfect in knowledge is with you. Behold, God is mighty and does not despise any. He is mighty in strength of understanding. He does not keep the wicked alive, but gives the afflicted their right. He does not withdraw his eyes from the righteous, but with kings on the throne, and sets them forever, and they are exalted. And if they are bound in chains and caught in the cords of affliction, then he declares to them their work and their transgressions, that they are behaving arrogantly. He opens their ears to instruction and commands that they return from iniquity. If they listen and serve him, they complete their days in prosperity and their years in pleasantness. But if they do not listen, they perish by the sword and die without knowledge. The godless in heart cherish anger. They do not cry for help when he binds them. They die in youth, and their life ends among the cult prostitutes. He delivers the afflicted by their affliction and opens their ear by adversary. He also allured you out of distress into a broad place where there was no cramping, and was set on your table, and what was set on your table was full of fatness. But you are full of the judgment of the wicked. Judgment and justice seize you. Beware lest wrath entice you into scoffing, and let not the greatness of the ransom turn you aside. Will your cry for help avail to keep you from distress, or all the force of your strength? Do not long for the night when peoples vanish into their place. Take care, do not turn to iniquity, for this you have chosen rather than affliction. Behold, God is exalted in his power. Who is a teacher like him? Who is prescribed for him this way? And who can say you have done wrong? Remember to extol his work, of which men have sung. All mankind has looked on it. Man beholds it from afar. Behold, God is great, and we know him not. The number of his years is unsearchable, for he draws up the drops of water. They distill in his mist and rain, which skies pour down and drop on mankind abundantly. Can anyone understand the spreading of the clouds, the thunderings of his pavilion? Behold, he scatters his lightning about them and covers the roots of the sea. For by these he judges people. He gives food in abundance. He covers his hands with lightning and commands it to strike the mark. Its crashing declares his presence. The cattle also declare that he rises. At this also my heart trembles and leaps out of its place. Keep listening to the thunder of his voice and the rumblings that come from his mouth. Under the whole heaven, he lets it go, and his lightning to the corners of the earth. After it, his voice roars, he thunders with a majestic voice, and he does not restrain the lightnings when his voice is heard. God thunders wondrously with his voice. He does great things that we cannot comprehend. For to the snow, he says, fall on the earth. Likewise to the downpour, his mighty downpour. He seals up the hand of every man, that all men whom he may know it. That all men whom he made may know it. Then the beasts go into their lairs and remain in their dens. From its chambers come the whirlwind, and cold from the scattering winds. By the breath of God, ice is given, and the broad waters are frozen fast. He loads the thick clouds with moisture, and the clouds scatter his lightning. They turn around and around by his guidance to accomplish all that he commands them on the face of the habitable world. Whether for correction or for his land or for love, he causes it to happen. Hear this, O Job, and stop and consider the wondrous works of God. Do you know how God lays his command upon them and causes the lightning of his cloud to shine? Do you know the balancing of the clouds and wondrous works of him who is perfect in knowledge, whose garments are hot when the earth is still because of the south wind? Can you, like him, spread out the skies hard as a cast metal mirror? Teach us what we shall say to him. We cannot draw up our case because of the darkness. Shall it be told him that I would speak? Did a man ever wish that he would be swallowed up? And now no one looks on the light when it is bright in the skies, when the wind has passed and cleared them. Out of the north comes golden splendor. God is clothed with awesome majesty, the Almighty. We cannot find him. He is great in power. Justice and abundant righteousness he will not violate. Therefore men fear him. He does not regard any who are wise in their own conceit.
Tremendous. You know, Elihu's right about a lot of stuff.
Yeah, there's this last part, it's like as he's speaking, like from about verse 22 or 24 and 36, he sees the storm. And then he just starts talking about what he sees. And it's like, I don't know. Like when there's like a shift in him where he's not like before, when he was like condemning the oppressed that cry out that aren't righteous.
Yeah.
Like that seems like a different way of thinking than when he's talking about the storm.
You know, I have a little story that kind of relates. When my oldest daughter was really little, she used to sing about everything.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, we'd be driving in the car and she'd be in her seat in the back, you know, and she'd be going, the cows and the horses and eating the grass and sun is shining. You know, and it was terrible, eh?
Right.
It didn't have a tune. And it was whatever her eyes saw.
Right.
Okay. And then she'd say to me, you know that song, Mom? And I'd say, I do know that song. Because when you're seeing all this and it's overwhelming you have this feeling like you just want to sing.
Yeah.
You want to sing it. You don't want to just say it. You want to sing it.
Yep.
Right? So that's what she was doing. And she'd say, and, you know, and her question, she's like 3, you know, her question was, do you know that song, Mom? Do you know the feelings I'm having? Do you know?
Right.
Right. And I'd be like, yeah, I do. I know that song, you know? And it feels to me like this is what Elihu's doing. He's like looking at, he sees it in the distance. His eyes are, and he's caught up in his own whirlwind of his oration, you know? And it just gets like all the majesty of the thing approaching is translated into his words. Mm-hmm. And, you know, mm-hmm. And he's not wrong. He's describing God like beautifully.
Right. And there's a, you know, back to like speech, wind, spirit is all the same. Like the spirit of God is coming and it kind of starts to come over him. And as it comes over him, he starts to the whole thing has that crescendo to it.
Yeah.
Because immediately
Elihu's
after
like,
this part,
he's like, you know that song, Job?
he's like, consider
Job's
this,
like,
Job.
yeah, I know that song.
Yeah.
He's caught up in the moment. Yeah.
Yep.
By the spirit, by the breath, right?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, totally.
Yeah. And yeah, I don't know quite what to talk about this. There's a couple things in 36.
Yeah.
The idea of redemptive suffering, because in 36:10, well, let me just 36. Let's see, 7. He does not withdraw his eyes from the righteous, but with kings on the throne, he sets them forever, and they are exalted. And if they are bound in chains and caught in the cord of affliction, he declares to them their work and their transgressions, that they are behaving arrogantly. So he kind of has this idea that righteousness has its own danger, which I think is true, is the danger of being prideful in your own righteousness.
Yeah.
I think he's attributing this to Job wrongly, but the idea itself isn't wrong. I mean, most of the stuff going forward is like, yeah, he's right, but this doesn't apply to Job because we know the beginning and the end. In verse 10, he's like, he opens their ears to instruction and commands that they return from their iniquity. And then again in 15, he says, he delivers the afflicted by their affliction and opens their ear by adversity.
Through suffering, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's true. If God will use, suffering that we sort of bring upon ourselves through our dumb decisions.
Right. This is the thing. It is true. It is true, but it's not the only truth.
Right. And it's bypassing Job's question is, why do the righteous suffer then?
Yeah, but he doesn't believe the righteous suffer, period.
Yeah, he doesn't believe the righteous ever suffer.
He doesn't believe that at all. Like, that's like stepping over the line. That's introducing all that chaos and holding things in tension, right? That none of them can handle. Mm-hmm. And so he's just like, no, I need certainty, right? I got to have my world in order so that I can order my steps, right? Basically. So I know my way. And so this is it. And that's all there is, right? But that's only one part of the story. That's not the whole thing, right? And this is how it is with, we call them half-truths. I think all lies are half-truths, actually, right? Or misunderstandings. But like there has to be an element of truth to it in order for it to even be believable. Like if you're caught with a candy bar and you didn't have any allowance and your mother says, where did you get that candy bar? Implying that you might have stolen it. And you said something like, well, when those satellites from Elon Musk were going over the other day, something fell from the sky and it was this candy bar. Like, it's just like, that's a bad lie, right?
Right.
It has to have some kind of truth to it.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think that it's not taking seriously what Job is saying. He's like, okay, the righteous suffer, but it's only because they have a hidden pride. They're not really righteous. And Job is trying to say, no, I'm really righteous. I wasn't prideful.
Yeah.
And if I was, tell me how I was. But he holds on to his integrity what he knows to be true. And he says, and then he's still asking the question, why do I suffer?
Well, his argument for pride and suffering doesn't really fly in the face of an infant, who suffers a terrible disease.
Well, yeah. But
how is the infant prideful?
Yeah, but then people just will tie themselves in knots to just be like, well, it's just everyone's sinful and we all deserve hell.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. The sins of the body.
You just wave your hand like this and like, oh, we're all trash.
Right.
Okay. What great answer. You didn't deal with the question.
No, that's exactly right. That's really good, Jess. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's kind of my pet peeve about people that don't want to wander into the landscape of pain and suffering, right? They don't want to, and they don't want to, like you just said, they're not dealing with the question at all.
Yeah. Because the question is, okay, why do the righteous suffer? And so then what is God doing? Is there ever a situation where God could be doing something where the righteous suffer, the blameless suffer, and for what purposes?
I thought of this the other day because we're going through this book, right? And I had these 2 baby chicks in a brooder in my house, but they were getting big. And so I made a brooder outside for them during the day because it was warm enough. And so I would pick them up out of the one in the house and I would take them outside and put them in a bigger space. And I did this for 2 weeks. 2 weeks every day. And every single time I reached in to pick these chicks up, they were just screaming, just like, wah! And I'd have to tuck them under my chin and go, it's okay, come on, and I'd put them in and then they'd run away from me, and then all of a sudden they'd be all happy because they were in their big space. And then in the evening, I'd go to get them and I was just like, I felt like the worst person ever. I'm like this giant groping thing.
Yeah.
And, the big ta-da, and then I'd put them back in their brooder and they'd be all happy because they had their heat lamp and, they know their little home, and so it was just constantly terrified by me. And I never did hurt them once, I never hurt them once, but they were, and yeah. So I don't know, maybe it's not a good analogy, but it's kind of like when God reaches into your life and he starts putting you places that are good for you, it can feel like suffering, right? And to say that he's doing it because he's punishing you. Like, this is the thing about misunderstanding God that really, really breaks my heart for God, because I know what it's like to be God. To the chicks, right? Just like, oh, come on, guys. I'm just trying to help you out, Right. I really want to do the best for you.
Yeah.
And I wish you would just sit quietly and look me in the eye and be happy, know? But no, but that's because I'm not a chicken, right?
Yeah.
If I was their mother, they'd be like, wee.
Maybe you should get a big chicken costume. But yeah. I do want to say one thing is like that thing inside Job that's so valuable that I think that God sees as so valuable is the very thing that Elihu wants Job to repent of and to give up.
Yeah.
And this would be a tragedy. And you see how religion does this to people. They'll have a sense of some sort of sense of self-worth, and it can be really fragile. It can be wrapped up in pride and some other stuff. And someone like an Elihu won't be delicate with it or won't try to help the person out with that. They'll just crush the whole thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that's kind of like that idea of stretching back reality and then having it snap back at you, because sooner or later those people are going to rebel against being having, the boot on their face, right?
Right.
They're going to be just like,
Right.
screw it. I mean, and you're seeing it everywhere. All this deconstructionism,
Yeah, let me read this little part here. It may have something to do with it. So 37, I'll start at 16. And what I want to talk about is 19 and 20. So he says, do you know the balancing of the clouds, the wondrous works of him who is perfect in knowledge? You whose garments are hot when this earth is still because of the south wind. Can you, like him, spread out the skies hard as a cast metal mirror? Teach us what we shall say to him. We cannot draw up our case because of darkness. Shall it be told him that I would speak? Did a man ever wish that he would be swallowed up? So I can't necessarily tell if Elihu is like mocking him or he's being sincere, or he's so verse 19, teach us what we shall say to him. We cannot draw up our case because of darkness. So Job has drawn up his case, right?
Yeah.
And then he says, so the storm is approaching, and he says, teach us what we shall say to him.
Are you wondering if he's backtracking here?
Well, I'm just is he mocking Job in this? Like, he's like, teach us what, he probably is, but there may be a sense where he's like, in the face of this dark looming storm.
Yeah. You're making a good point here, because let me just read it in the King James. Where did you start again? 16?
So I started in 16, but I really want to talk about 19 and 20.
Okay. 16, dost thou know the balancing of the clouds, the wondrous works of him which is perfect in knowledge? How your garments are warm when he quiets the earth by the south wind? Hast thou with him spread out the sky, which is strong and as a molten looking glass? Teach us what we shall say unto him, for we cannot order our speech by reason of darkness. Shall it be told him that I speak? If a man speak, surely he will be swallowed up.
Mm-hmm. He's afraid to speak to God.
Yeah. And now men see not the bright light which is in the clouds, but the wind passes and cleanses them. Fair weather comes out of the north. With God is terrible majesty. Yeah, I don't know. He, like you said, he is seeing the storm coming.
Mm-hmm. Maybe
he's starting to pee his pants a little bit.
Yeah.
Maybe. It's hard to say. I it would be interesting to know more about the Hebrew. And, there's so much of this, even in the past here. Man, I wish, well, I won't even get into it, but I wish I knew Hebrew. I just do.
The little Hebrew thing on Bible Hub says, teach us what we should say to him. We cannot draw up our case when our faces are in darkness. And 20 says, he should be told that should he be told that I want to speak? Would a man ask to be swallowed up, to be engulfed?
That sounds like a critique on Job saying, I want a face-to-face with you.
Yeah, he's saying like this is what you get when you ask to talk to God. You're going to get devoured.
Swallowed up. Yeah.
And then do want to point out in verse 24, he says, therefore men fear him. He does not regard any who are wise in their own conceit or wise in their own heart. And that's one of those, so often the friends will end with sort of an ironic statement, and that is definitely one of them. Mm-hmm. If anyone is wise in their own heart, it is
Meanwhile, he started off the whole thing with, hearken unto me, hold your peace, and I shall teach you wisdom.
Yeah. And then in 36, he says, truly, my words are not false. One who is perfect in knowledge is with you.
I know. Wow.
So
when you read that, I was just like, oh my goodness. I mean, perfect there doesn't mean perfect. It means whole, complete.
mm-hmm.
Like he thinks he's got the whole shebang.
I've got the whole system down.
He's got it all figured out. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
wow.
So people wonder what happened to Eliphaz after this.
Elihu.
So I'd like to contribute my 2 cents of my.
You mean Elihu, right?
Sorry. People wonder what happened to Elihu after this because he's not mentioned again. How many times have I said Eliphaz instead of Elihu?
No, only twice. Only
all
twice.
Right. We'll watch the tape back and
we'll I corrected you each time.
Okay, good.
Just to be sure that nobody got it mixed up.
There was one time I was talking about Leviathan to some friends, but I said Lethvian for whatever reason. And I talked for like 10 minutes and like, what's Lethvian? I was like, Leviathan. They're like, okay, we don't know what you're talking about. It was so stupid. But this is my theory. Elihu is swallowed up by the whirlwind. He gives his speech. I picture him standing on this rock, the whirlwind coming up behind him, and he goes,
yeah. Well, he actually foresaw it, right? Like he even said, "Sir, shall it be told him that I speak? If a man speak, surely he shall be swallowed up."
I know. That's why I was thinking that. I was like, maybe he just got swallowed up.
Totally.
Because he's wise.
So then the last verse was said like this: "Men do therefore fear him, be respected not any that are wise of war."
And then the Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind. If I was going to make the movie, that's how it happened.
Perfect.
Elihu's like the super villain. He's like,
I actually have. It's so weird because I know you were pressing me a little in the beginning of this series with having a little more compassion for Job's friends. And I find that really difficult to do, but I actually have more compassion for Elihu, honestly. Yeah, because he's young.
Yeah.
And it makes sense.
This guy doesn't know anything.
Yeah, it makes sense to me that he would be so, I don't know, stürmisch, they say in Swiss, stormy.
Mm-hmm.
He's stormy, right?
Yeah.
He wants to, he's like a bull in a china shop. Like he's just like, he's full of himself. He's full of anger, right?
Yeah.
He thinks he's got the whole world figured out,
He's angry at these old guys who are supposed to know it and they don't.
And I mean, I don't know if anybody watching has had teenagers, but hang on to your hats, folks.
I've got a couple.
And that's how, and I mean, I was one of them as a teenager. I was the same way. I thought I had everything figured out. I thought the old wise people in my life were stupid. I think every comedian probably has a line or two about how, the older you get as a teenager, the stupider your parents get,
Yeah. Windbags.
Yeah, total windbags. And that's always the struggle in culture, right? Is between the young and the old, right? The tradition and the progressiveness of culture,
Mm-hmm.
And there is a balance to be had there, where you have to respect the tradition, but you also need to refresh it at the same time.
Right.
I mean, Elihu's not bringing anything new, really. He's just bringing it in a new way.
Yeah.
Right? He still has this doctrine of retribution. But like his misquoting Job and taking his quotes out of context and everything, I think that has a lot to do with his youthfulness. Like he just doesn't really, he's not listening properly. So I don't know. I feel more empathy for Elihu
Yeah, than
than
for
I do for the old
older
guys who
friends.
should know better.
Right.
Just like, yeah, I got no
Right.
time for you.
Right. Well, I'm glad you have some empathy for Elihu.
I do.
All right. Any final thoughts?
That's it.
All right. Well, thank you, Shari. It was
Thanks, Jess.
great. Next time we have God's speech.
Yes.
Here he comes.